Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 817 for the 2nd of June, 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from the Berkeley, California Skeptic Zone studios. Coming up on this week's show, it's Kate and Allie, the return of Kate and Allie, those loons from Canada. Kat McLeod and Adrienne Hill, they're going to be talking about a skeptical look at baby helmets. Baby helmets? Helmets for babies? What's that all about? Stay tuned for Kate and Allie. Following that, it's Brian Dunning. It was a lot of fun. The other night we went to Nerd Night in Bend, Oregon. This is a monthly event, sort of like Skeptics in the Pub, and we had trivia. I gave a short talk, and then Brian Dunning presented a night of trivia. We're going to eavesdrop and hear a round of trivia so you can test your trivial knowledge with Brian Dunning. Then it's guest reporter Rob Palmer, the well-known skeptic. He recently went to Skepticamp in Raleigh, North Carolina. And this is a series, this is the beginning of a series of interviews from that event. And this week, Rob chats to Coleman Watts and Erika Engelhaupt. Then to round off today's episode, we have the Trove segment looking at seances. Seances, yes, you don't really hear much about seances anymore. They've sort of been consigned to images from the past, I guess. Long forgotten memories. Sometimes the woo that we investigate does actually fade into history. In fact, I'm thinking of developing a report or a talk based on all the things people once believed in, like seances and rituals and things like that, which have faded from our lives. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to open the door, walk up the hall, and find some toast. Toast with butter. What could be better? What could be better? While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. It's the loons from Canada. Here's Kate and Allie.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill coming to you from Skepticamp Studios in Calgary. And with me once again is Kat McLeod. Hello, Kat.
Hi, Adrienne. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So this week, we are going to talk about baby helmets, specifically those used to reshape the cranium when a baby has plagiocephaly, which is commonly known as a flat or misshapen head.
You know, Adrienne, I love our weird and wonderful chats, and I have gone down some bizarre rabbit holes, but I must admit that this is one of the creepiest things I've investigated for the Skeptic Zone. I never imagined I would willingly be looking at so many pictures of babies.
And not just regular babies, but babies with flat heads.
Misshapen heads.
Yeah, misshapen heads, exactly. So it's quite distressing.
It was.
And we would be remiss if we did not note that you should always follow the advice of medical professionals. And there are some rare instances of severe plagiocephaly that do require medical intervention and prescribed physiotherapy and sometimes even a helmet. So don't take this as being don't ever get a helmet. However, the vast majority of cases will correct themselves without the use of a helmet. And there is something called torticollis, which is a shortening of the neck muscles on one side, which reduces the ability to move the head. And this can be an issue that an infant experiences in conjunction with the plagiocephaly, and this can also be corrected without a helmet. So there's multiple different things that can cause these issues with the misshapen head, and most can be treated without.
Exactly. In the vast majority of cases, non-synostoic positional plagiocephaly is a mechanical distortion that corrects itself as the child grows. Studies have shown that the helmet therapy is no more effective than leaving the head to remold naturally as the baby grows, and yet there are a plethora of places who are promoting the sale of these helmets. Both Choosing Wisely UK and Choosing Wisely Canada have advised against helmet therapy as an intervention for positional plagiocephaly and brachycephaly. There are no benefits to the use of helmet therapy in most cases. Clinics are preying upon nervous parents and promote using helmets that are not helpful and can be harmful.
And I also want to give a little shout out to Rob Palmer. He's the one that brought this to our attention. He had never heard of this before, and to be honest, I hadn't either. Had you heard of this before, Kat?
I had seen babies wearing helmets before. I definitely had not heard of this.
And according to a 2013 study conducted at our own Mount Royal University here in Calgary, they published in the academic journal Pediatrics and found nearly 50% of infants have some form of plagiocephaly. In most cases, the flatness was minor and will mend without serious intervention. For others, it could lead to an asymmetrical skull and facial distortions. But in that case, specialized helmet to reshape the infant's skull and physiotherapy may be required. And it is important to note that the condition does not affect the brain's development. And I think that's an important point. This is purely aesthetic, right?
Yes, a lot of the clinics will put pressure on parents to use the helmets because they infer that it will affect the child's brain development, and it absolutely does not. It's interesting to note that doctors have seen an increase in the number of infants with plagiocephaly since the 1990s, when parents were encouraged to put their babies to sleep on their backs to prevent sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Plagiocephaly develops when the pressure is put on one part of the baby's head from sleep or staying in one position for prolonged periods. Premature babies are more likely to have flattened skulls because they are softer than those of full-term babies.
Well, that makes sense. Unfortunately, many clinics do use scare tactics to pressure the parents into buying these helmets, and some are even wanting credit cards before the parents have even booked an appointment. And I did see that on several sites, and I think that's awful, to be honest.
It's predatory.
It is. It's predatory. And some places advise parents to begin using helmets as soon as possible and as early as 4 months.
4 months is shocking. The Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, the orthotics department, only provides helmets for children with severe plagiocephaly only after 6 months of age, after other treatments have not been effective.
Yeah. And the goal of these clinics that are selling these helmets is not to treat the condition in the best interest of the baby. So the prices at these places often include the assessment, the so-called diagnosis, the custom helmet fabrication, and then bi-weekly orthotist visits for 4 to 6 months to adjust the helmet. And an orthotist is just somebody, I believe, who creates splints and orthotics and things like that, correct?
Yes, as well as any kind of like artificial limbs, things like that.
So I'm going to draw attention to some of the wording they use on these websites because I think it misrepresents what they're actually offering. They call themselves clinics. And of course, as I just said, they provide a diagnosis. And you meet with clinicians who are actually orthoticists and not pediatricians, which I think is hugely important. Did you actually find out how much these baby helmets cost, Kat?
The helmets are, as you'd suspect, not cheap. Although you can find some very cheap ones on Amazon and other online websites, but the official ones to reshape the head range from about $1,500 to $3,000. The average cost in Canada is $2,500.
And those are all Canadian dollars, are they?
Yes, Canadian dollars is all I could find. I'm very sorry. In September 2011, the Alberta Health Services stopped funding the helmets because studies found that mild to moderate cases of plagiocephaly could be improved by active repositioning therapy and have similar long-term cosmetic outcomes as helmets. So basically, don't lay your baby flat on its back and give it tummy time during the day.
Right.
The insurance companies around the world will not reimburse the cost of these helmets unless you have detailed documentation from your doctor and evidence that repositioning therapy was not effective.
And a lot of these clinics recommend wearing them for months and months and months, whereas even the severe cases, I don't think they don't wear them that long, do they?
Some might, depending on the severity of the deformity. I mean, these poor kids, they're left in these helmets for 23 hours a day.
And I think that leads us nicely into the next bit, which is the side effects. Are there side effects? And I was actually really surprised because when I was first introduced to this, I just thought, well,
it's like putting a toque on your baby.
Yeah, exactly. But because this is on the baby for 23 hours a day, there are side effects. And the side effects include rashes, pressure points, it's like pressure sores and skin breakdown, and even itching, which makes sense because if you think about people wearing casts for 24 hours a day, they get itchy skin. And so why would it be any different for these babies that have to wear these helmets for so much of the day?
96% of babies who are subjected to the helmets will have skin irritation.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Why do you want to make your baby cranky? Is it just me, or is that like a silly thing to ask? A lot of parents also complained, 77%, if you want the statistics, complained that they had difficulty cuddling and bonding with their child as well.
No, that makes sense.
These helmets are not tiny. They're clunky. So you can't get in there and snuggle like you would with a kitten. So the bottom line is that if you have a baby with a flat head, do not panic. Talk to your pediatrician. Chances are things will sort themselves out without any painful helmet therapy. Save yourself some money.
Yeah, save yourself some money and irritation for the baby.
Yes, and irritation for you, because apparently irritated babies are not fun to be around.
Well, thanks so much, Kat, again for hanging out with me. It's a blast as usual.
Thanks for sticking with me, Adrienne. It's been fun.
And until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
And Kat McLeod.
This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
During the week, it was my pleasure to present a small talk on strange energies at Bend Nerd Night. This is the monthly get-together hosted by Brian Dunning from Skeptoid. The main focus of the night, however, was trivia. And to give you a flavour, here is one of the rounds, so you can play along and see how you go with these questions concerning energy.
Time for category number 2, real energy. Enough of that fake energy. This is real energy, and it's stuff that people might reasonably be expected to know without having heard Richard's talk. So here we go. Question number 1 about real energy. What is the law that states energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed? The law has a common name. Question 2. What type of energy does a moving object possess? Question 3, what is the process called where plants convert sunlight into chemical energy? Number 4, what type of energy is harnessed from flowing water to generate electricity? Number 5, what is the primary source of energy for the Earth? No, it's not psychic energy. What device converts mechanical energy into electrical energy? Mechanical into... Was that me? That's how did your thing go through that? I won't ask.
Strange energies.
Strange energies. They're still with us. Was that really me? One thing you should always do when giving a presentation is switch to do not disturb mode. Okay, there. Okay, where are we? Number 7. What is the term for the energy an object has due to its height above the ground? That was a quick little hand wave, like, oh, that's so easy, I don't need to think about that. All right, sir. Got some more questions for you coming up. Number 8, what law explains the relationship between voltage, current, and resistance? Don't make me laugh, that doesn't help. Number 9, what is the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a substance? There's a common name for the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a substance. And number 10, what device stores chemical energy and converts it to electrical energy? Chemical to electric. Good luck, everyone. 5 minutes. Okay, real energy. Here we go. Category 2. Question 1. The law of conservation of energy is what we call that. Number 2. Kinetic energy is what a moving object possesses. I saw a high five there. We like that here. Kinetic energy. Photosynthesis is the process where plants convert sunlight into chemical energy. And hydroelectric is the type of energy harnessed from flowing water. Number 5, the sun is the primary source of energy for the Earth. Moving on to number 6, a generator converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. Dynamo is acceptable, yes. Motor is not acceptable. A motor is a machine that provides motive force. Is that correct? A machine is a device that performs mechanical work. A motor is a machine that provides motive force. I think that's right. Okay, moving on. Nobody cares about my rambling. Potential energy is the term for an object, the energy of an object due to its height above the ground. Number 8, Ohm's law explains the relationship between voltage, current, and resistance. Spelling does not count. Number 9, temperature is the common term for the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a substance. And number 10, a battery stores chemical energy and converts it to electrical energy. What did you want? Law of conservation of energy. Okay, overruled. We will accept that then. First law of thermodynamics is an acceptable one. What type of energy is harnessed? Kinetic energy? Ooh. I'm going to agree with that. Yeah. If you put kinetic energy for number 4, yeah, because I said what type of energy, not what do we call that type of power that appears on your bill. Okay.
There were 4 rounds altogether, and then it came time to mark the scores. We pick up the action near the end of the evening.
Very good. And the small furry mammals. 36! Oh my goodness. Wow. That is 4 of the highest scores we've ever had. But the crown goes to Fridana, right? Okay. Come on up to the front and collect your prizes. And a huge round of applause, which just happened, so my announcement was late. Thank you very much for playing, everyone. Great scores. Super impressive. The best place to find out about these is at our Facebook group, facebook.com groups, Bend Nerds. Just search for Bend Nerds. It's a last Tuesday of the month thing. And thank you very much for playing. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Nerd Night in Bend, Oregon. Fast becoming an institution, a great night out, and certainly worth attending if you're in the area.
Hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone, voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
Hello all, this is Rob Palmer. I write for Skeptical Inquirer as the well-known skeptic. This week on the Skeptic Zone is part one of a series of interviews with people who attended the inaugural Skepticamp in Raleigh, run by the Triangle Skeptics of North Carolina. This event was held on May 25th, which happened to be Towel Day. I was cajoled into attending this Skepticamp by Susan Gerbic, who has made it her mission to try to get skeptic clubs all over the world to host a Skepticamp. My talk was titled, The UFO Presentation They Don't Want You to Attend. And yes, I may have stolen the idea for that title from a recent documentary that some actually well-known podcaster created on the same subject. So this was my very first Skepticamp. What is a Skepticamp, you may ask? Wikipedia describes it as a small grassroots conference. The format can vary widely, but generally, they're a single-day conference of talks. But other events, such as a Skeptics in the Pub meeting or an excursion to some nearby attraction having something to do with science or skepticism, may be added to the day prior to or following the main day. And that's exactly what happened in Raleigh. We had a Skeptics in the Pub the day before the main event, and then the day after we had an excursion to a historic site with a supposedly haunted house. This felt a bit like a real camp, because Susan Gerbic had arranged a 6-bedroom Airbnb for herself and all the speakers. We were together quite a bit before and after the big day, and it was quite easy to grab people for interviews. So I hope you enjoy them, and that they give you some insight into what it's like to attend a Skepticamp. In this episode, I interview Coleman Watts, the host of the Think This Through YouTube channel, and also Erika Engelhaupt, science journalist and the author of Gory Details. Hi, we're here at the Triangle SkeptiCamp, their first ever in North Carolina. I am here with another speaker. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Coleman Watts, and I'm the host of the Think This Through channel on YouTube.
So what is your talk going to be about?
I am going to, I've called the title of my talk, How to Challenge Your Beliefs Without Looking Like an Idiot. And it's sort of an ironic title because I feel like I often do look like an idiot when I am corrected or my beliefs gets challenged. And certainly my entire journey from the wayward path of not really having any concrete basis for believing or not believing things to scientific skepticism, I don't think makes me look good, but here I am.
Well, that's just great to air your dirty laundry in public, but it's a great thing to show that just because someone isn't a skeptic at a certain point in their life that they can change.
Yeah, and I, really look up to all the people who have come before me and paved the way, and the people who are putting on this conference, and the people that have been running Skeptics podcast for years. I just started my show 2 years ago, and it's been a really fun experience of mixing my own personal experiences of getting sucked into various conspiracy theories and also just finding out that certain of my beliefs that I went through life not just taking for granted actually turned out to be wrong.
So I've seen quite a few of your episodes, I'm sure not all of them, but the one that I really loved was your polite critique of John Oliver in his both waysism with the subject of are UFOs really extraterrestrial spacecraft. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I saw that episode when it aired before it came out on YouTube, and I thought, oh man, I've got a tiny window of opportunity to put together an episode that will come out shortly after John Oliver's episode comes out on YouTube. And I really wanted to do so. I just cooked and did all of the research I could in as short a time as I could. Fortunately, I had already seen Brian Dunning's film.
The UFO movie they don't want you to see.
Yes, I'd already seen that. I'd already read some books on the subject. I'd already seen some of the debunks that Mick West had done. And so I had all of that sort of crammed in my head, and I just had to get it out in a coherent way. When that episode came out, I watched it with my wife right before we were going to go to sleep. And then as soon as it was over, I was like, okay, I'm really tired. I'm going to go to sleep. And about 15 minutes later, I was still wide awake and my head was buzzing, and I just had to get up and spent the next hour or so typing out all of my ideas for what I was going to do as a rebuttal for that. And that ended up not being a really usable script because it was late and I was not very coherent. But it did sort of get my ideas out, and then I spent the next week or so taking those ideas and doing the follow-up research to make sure I actually knew what I was talking about, because I do like to at least try, and turn it into an episode that I could actually show.
And it was amazing. I had actually seen some critiques from people in the skeptic community, and yours was by far the best. And it was funny and well done.
Well, thank you. And also thanks to all of the people that put together that information. I wasn't the person, like on Mick West's team doing the original research or recreating the whole thing virtually in SitRec. I was able to use their content though and display what they've done.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing your talk tomorrow and finding out about your past and how you became the skeptic you are.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it as well.
We're on a lunch break for the Triangle SkeptiCamp, and I'd like to introduce one of the other speakers here. Can you tell us who you are and what your talk is going to be about?
Yeah, my name is Erika Engelhaupt, and I am the author of a book called Gory Details, Adventures from the Dark Side of Science. And I'm going to be talking about the topic of disgust today and how it meddles with our minds, how the emotion of disgust basically influences the way we think, and in some cases can make us susceptible to misinformation, myths, things that play into our feelings, disgust being just another emotion along with, all of the others that influence our opinions.
Never thought of disgust as an emotion. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So, and you talked about this at SciCon last October.
I did,
as well.
I did.
And you've written a book on the subject?
So the book is about a number of topics, but disgust is kind of a theme that runs throughout the book. I like writing about subjects that are somewhat either taboo, considered disgusting, or otherwise kind of a little out of the mainstream, things that we don't talk about. And the reason is, it all kind of started back when I was an editor at Science News magazine. One of my duties as an editor was I handled the book reviews sections for Science News magazine. And so in addition to editing the book reviews, I wrote a lot of book reviews. So I read a lot of popular science books. And an opportunity came along when we were going to start doing blogs at Science News. And I was really excited. I really wanted to write a blog. I felt as an editor, I wanted to bust out and do more writing. So I said, well, what could I do a blog about? The blog had to be on some kind of topic, some kind of subject, and have a focus. And I looked at my bookshelf behind me where I had all these books that I had read and reviewed or just read because I was interested in them. And all these titles were like Blood Work and The Killer of Little Shepherds and a bunch of Mary Roach books, like Stiff and Bonk. And I was like, you know what? I think there's kind of a theme to my interests that I had not
realize that.
I did not really put it together, but I read too much Stephen King as a kid.
Now, so I have read almost every Stephen King novel, and I do not have this interest.
Yeah,
so
you do not have.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I'm not particularly squeamish about blood and medical stuff. So when I was in college, I thought about becoming a doctor. Being squeamish wouldn't have been the thing that held me back. But I decided eventually in my life to become a science journalist because I could learn about so many different things. I had a lot of curiosity, and I feel like the best way for me to satisfy that curiosity was to be able to be constantly learning something new and researching it and writing about it. So that's been really satisfying to me. So some of my interests kind of shifted over time, and I started to become more and more interested in things that were taboo, which turns out to often be because they're related to things that people find disgusting. And, so I started getting interested in things like women's health and women's bodies, which have been made taboo in many ways. And I started thinking more about things like, how does disgust play into the way we react to many things in the world around us? And I do think that disgust is an emotion that can be kind of weaponized against people.
So how so? Give me an example of it being weaponized.
So, one thing I'm going to talk about in my talk today is how disgust is weaponized in political speech. For example, when you start listening to a lot of the political rhetoric around all of the issues that are hot button topics right now, whether it's abortion or even immigration.
So U.S. political issues.
U.S. political issues. You will see people using language like describing immigrants literally as vermin, or saying they're poisoning the blood of our country.
Yes, that's happened.
You see that kind of language that is, when we talk about language that others someone or sets them out of the group, often that also will play into language of disgust. So, because you can use that to basically other someone, to say
that's an interesting connection. I've heard in the news that those terms have been used, and I didn't connect it with disgust. But now that you say it makes sense.
Yeah. So once you start thinking about that, you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. Now I'm going to be thinking about disgusting things all the time. Thank you, Erika. All right, this is a good place to wrap this up.
I hope that I've opened your mind to a little corner of the disgusting world around us.
I will watch your presentation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully,
Thank you.
I don't get too disgusted.
I hope not to disgust you too much.
Thank you.
Next week, in part 2 of the series, I interview skeptical investigator Kenny Biddle, who did a talk, as well as attendee Jane Selke.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Cain and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
Now it's time once again to go back to those archives, the digital delights, the trove. It is a trove, a treasure trove of information for us at trove.nla.gov.au. Go there, type in your search. You never know what you might find. We have found hundreds of items relating to the paranormal, the supernatural, alternative medicine, stories of interest to skeptics. We've looked at so many topics over the last few years of doing Trove, and there are many more topics to come. One topic we haven't looked at specifically is seances. Now, I'm sure you know what I mean, the classic scene, the darkened room, Victorian, Edwardian, the psychic or the medium at the head of the table, usually Madam So-and-so. Let's all hold hands and contact the spirits, take a breath. And of course there were the performances passed off as real, where once the lights were all out, people would creep around the room, or sticks were used to make things float about. Now let's see what we can discover written in the pages of the Australian press over the decades about seances. And this week we'll be looking more or less through the archives of the Sydney Morning Herald. So we start on October the 1st, 1967 in the Sydney Morning Herald. The Bishop Who Heard the Spirits. From Darren Hinch in New York. Darren Hinch. He went on to be a very famous journalist, TV presenter, radio presenter, and senator here in Australia. And last I heard, I think he's going to be making another run for politics. I'm not sure. He's still going. And indeed, he is a noted skeptic. The twilight world of seances, mediums, and conversations with the dead, which has always had as many skeptics as supporters, this week received recognition from a former Episcopal Church bishop. Controversial prelate, the Right Reverend James Pike, former bishop of the California Diocese, claimed he had attended a seance and communicated with his 22-year-old son James, who committed suicide in New York last year. Bishop Pike said he had also communicated with several of his deceased colleagues during the seance, which was held in Toronto. I believe these messages were authentic. Bishop Pike said, "To me, this is the most plausible explanation of the phenomena that occurred." Bishop Pike's experience occurred during a television seance, which was part of a program dealing with his current dispute with his church over certain traditional doctrines. He said this week that he plans to write a book on his communication with the deceased persons because he is eager to put these experiences in the proper scientific and theological perspective. Bishop Pike has published a book, If This Be Heresy, dealing with the controversy between him and the church only 2 weeks ago. In the book, he argued that psychic phenomena are part of the body of scientific evidence that life continues beyond the grave. At the Toronto seance, where Alan Farragut, religious editor of the Toronto Star, and the Reverend Arthur Ford, a minister of the Disciples of Christ Church, who is one of the best-known mediums in North America. Ford, whose powers have been authenticated by several American psychiatrists, usually works through a, quote, spirit control, end quote, named Fletcher, whom he describes as a, quote, deceased French-Canadian friend, end quote. Fletcher passes on messages from other dead people through Ford, who repeats them while in a trance. And today we would call those channelers. Although they had their heyday about 30 years ago. Yeah, about 30 years ago. There are still one or two kicking about. On TikTok you can sometimes see these people. Pike, recounting his experience, said his son was the only person who spoke directly to him without going through Fletcher. Pike Jr. shot himself in a West Side hotel room in February last year. Bishop Pike said the seance was astonishing. Mr. Ford put a handkerchief over his eyes and through yogi exercises went into a trance. He produced quite a number of persons who seemed to be in communication control of the guide Fletcher. Some I barely remembered, but all later panned out. In the course of this, my son apparently spoke directly through to me without a third person. He referred to events, a lot of difficulties, and seemed very aware of things. Pike said. He explained the difficulties were those stemming from his troubles with the church. And there's a picture here of the bishop. Bishop Pike said his dead son spoke to him during a seance. And now from 1973, on the 12th of February, in the Sydney Morning Herald, an alarming story. Alarm over seances for Sydney teenagers. Increasing numbers of young teenagers in Sydney are reported to be taking part in seances and occult rituals. A story by Christine McGee. A research psychologist from Sydney University, Mr. David Brown, who has studied various magic practices in his work, said this yesterday. Protests against the practices were voiced this week by church and community leaders and psychiatrists. Father Jim McLaren. Why does that name ring a bell? Maybe he was on the media. Father Jim McLaren, a Roman Catholic priest who conducts a weekly radio program, on teenagers' problems, described occult practices as poisonous, extreme fears. Seances create extreme fears in an atmosphere of dark mystery, and most of the answers to questions in them spring from the participants' inner fear and guilt feelings. He said, they all begin with healthy curiosity and often end in most morbid areas. Immature and unstable members of the group become tormented by the experience without recognizing that the fear is rooted in their own personalities. Father Jim McLaren said he knew of a case where a 17-year-old boy from Sydney drove to Wollongong to attend a séance. 1973. Driving to Wollongong, depending on where he was living in Sydney, would have taken him between, shall I say, 2 and 3 hours. The boy was told that if he took his friends back to Sydney in his car, all would be killed in a motor accident. He was so frightened that he took a train home, Father McLaren said. He added, I certainly believe that the practices are very widespread, and I have had many questions on this subject. A report compiled by 2 final-year student teachers from Adelaide College of Advanced Education published this week documented a marked increase in occult practices among Adelaide teenagers. The student teachers, Christine Davey, 22, and Andrew Callow, 22, called their survey Parapsychological Phenomena in some South Australian metropolitan secondary schools, a survey of occult practices, their extent and influence. They said in their report that each of the 240 children questioned knew about some or all aspects of the occult. More than 1 in 10 of the students had taken part in more than 20 séances in the previous year, and a large proportion had attended at least 10 séances. Really? That seems an awful lot. One 14-year-old boy told the researchers that he attended black masses regularly and had adopted witchcraft as his religion. One girl in the survey said she was told at the séance that her friend would be killed at 10 a.m. the next day, and it was true. The researchers said such serious predictions were psychologically harmful. Mr. Brown said he was not surprised by the teenagers' familiarity with psychic phenomena. Religion is less relevant to young people today because it fails to relate realistically to their lifestyle, yet these same teenagers feel they need some spiritual outlet to counteract the materialistic influence of society, he said. Father McLaren said parents should be aware of the dangers if their sons or daughters attended casually arranged séances. A casually arranged séance, does that mean you turn up in your jeans and t-shirt and... Oh boy, the worries they had way back then about séances and the occult. You don't hear much about the occult anymore. What happened to that? It's more about damned UFOs and UAPs, it seems. And now from 1994, Thursday, August the 4th, Calling Andy. Saturday may or may not be Andy Warhol's 66th birthday. While we can be sure he most certainly died in 1987, the King of Pop's precise birth date is not known. So Jamie Warhola, his nephew, intends to ask him at a pre-birthday séance in New York today, to be conducted by 2 psychics, Ellie Crystal and John J. Edward. The purpose is to find out where his soul is, what growth it has had, what work it is doing there, and what messages it has for those left here. The suitably named Miss Crystal told the New York Times. Warhola said he saw nothing strange about the séance and was still contemplating what he might say to his uncle. I would probably like to know that he's happy and to tell him we miss him very much, he said. Given that Andy's renowned vanity died with him, Bhola didn't address the possibility that his uncle might have lied about his age. Now, I've been to many psychic performances and readings and so on in my time, but I must admit I've never been to a seance. Wouldn't that be interesting? But you don't have to go to a seance to enjoy the treasures of Trove. You don't need to hear from the dead to discover the past. You can do your search in the archives and read for yourself, because when you go there, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to all those wonderful people who subscribe to the Skeptic Zone podcast via Patreon or PayPal. And thank you to those people who recently, for, one reason or another, had to bow out with their support. I completely understand. I was very, very grateful for your support while it lasted, but thank you also to the new people who have signed on. And before I go, a big thank you. I never thank this person enough for checking my work. Having troubles with spelling and reading all my life, it's nice to have someone cast their eyes over what I do, and they correct it, and sometimes I correct it back and it's wrong when I do it. But I do appreciate it. Always good to have a second pair of eyes. Check your work. But for this week, from sunny Berkeley here in California, this is Richard Saunders signing off, and possibly this week we might briefly, very briefly, blink and you'll miss it, hear once more from Kate and Allie.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hi, it's Kate and Allie here to do the dice game. Hi, Allie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So excited that we have some new dice that we can use today that Richard left us after the Week in Reason conference. It was a couple weeks ago. You recovered from that?
I have. In fact, I'm going through a little bit of withdrawal. I'm starting to miss everybody.
It was such a fun time.
It was incredible.
I did something that I know Richard would enjoy. I went into Meta AI and asked it to do a potential opening for the dice game for Kate and Allie on the Skeptic Zone. And here's what it said. Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, where we're about to put Kate and Allie, that's you and I,
that's us,
psychic abilities to the test. Or are we? Today we're playing a game of dice. But with a twist. We're claiming that the dice hold mystical powers, especially my orange one.
Ooh.
And our hosts will use their supposed psychic abilities to predict the outcome of each roll. Will they be able to tap into the cosmic energy of the dice and accurately predict the numbers? Or will their skepticism get the best of them and reveal the truth about this so-called psychic game? So I want everybody to join us as we roll the dice, test the limits of reason, and maybe, just maybe, uncover a hidden talent for clairvoyance. Or not.
Or not.
Or not. Exactly. Well, I thought I was psychic for a moment last week because I predicted that the Edmonton Oilers were going to win 5-1 against the Vancouver Canucks. I was pretty astounded that I was able to do that. So I tried my psychic powers for the next game. and I got it backwards and also not in overtime. So maybe my psychic powers are a little limited.
Well, and I thought for the Game 7 that the Oilers would win it 4-2, scoring in an empty net at the end of the game. And they didn't. They won 3-2.
Yeah.
Even though there was an empty net at the end of the game, they did not.
They did not score.
The fourth goal.
I got the numbers right, 3-2. Just the wrong team. I don't know if that counts. Maybe, we got to just keep moving the goalposts. Isn't that what we do?
I'm pretty sure, we can use a confirmation bias to make it fit whatever we want it to.
I guess we should get to the dice game, huh?
I guess so.
So
look at you making me work.
I know. Time for the dice game. And do you want to go first, Kate?
I would love to go first. I'm going to use this ginormous die, 20-sided die that Mr. Saunders gifted me. Barely fits in my tiny hamster hands. So what is your prediction for what the number will be?
I'm going to go with 20.
Ooh, all right. I'm going to go with 19, even though it's never, ever 19. It's 14.
Wow. Well, neither of us got that one. I'm going to choose a D10, and it's this lovely one that Richard gave me.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Is it pretty? It's got blue, my favorite color, with purple, my favorite color. I guess I have a lot of favorite colors. So between 1 and 10, or if we want to beg to differ with Mr. Saunders, between 0 and 9, what would you like to guess?
I'm going to guess not.
Okay.
It'll be 0 or 10.
I'm going to go with 6. It is a 6.
Ooh, mine is a 6 too. Ah! I rolled my D10 too.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, your psychic powers are strong.
The dice connection, the energy connection between your and my D10 obviously was on point. All right, third one.
Because they're both a shade of blue.
There we go.
Clearly,
that's what it is. So what kind of die are you going to roll this time?
I am going to use my little blue D12.
All right.
So predictions?
I'm going to go with 6 again.
All right, I'm going to go with 7.
Ooh.
Even though it's probably going to be 5 for Susan Gerbic. It's 11.
So far we've had a 14, a 6, and an 11. Now the bonus round. I'm going to pick our favorite die, this, lavender one that we didn't do well with. It's a D4, so 4-sided, and Kate and I know how to use these now.
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
We have a much better chance of actually guessing the number for this one. So as the bonus, I am going to go with number 3. How about you?
Number 1. I'm number 1.
Number 2.
Mine's a 2 as well.
The dice have connection.
See, whenever I listen to the dice game, I always play along with my own die. That's why I'm rolling as well with you, because that's the fun of the game.
Well, there we have it. Can you give us a summary, Kate?
14, 6, 11, and 2. These are your unlucky, unscientific, totally psychic numbers.